Julian Reese is coming back.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Huge news in the Maryland basketball community, maybe the biggest news of the offseason. Julian Reese is coming back to Maryland. The report came out just today, about when I woke up, a little bit after I woke up, I think. I saw all over my Twitter timeline that Julian Reese will be coming back to Maryland. And I think it's the biggest news of the offseason. No matter what happens the rest of the offseason, at least unless there's an injury or something like that, which God forbid there is something like that happens. But I think if everything else goes to plan, no matter who else we get, no matter what else happens, coaching changes, portal use, people entering the portal, I don't know if there is going to be bigger news than this report that Julian Reese will be coming back to College Park and to finish his career as a Maryland Terrapin. Just about the biggest news you can get for Maryland basketball, and not just big news, but great news. Sometimes news is big, but it's not good news. This is good news and big news, and usually big news and good news, when those two come together in sports, usually it's an exciting time for people like me and for people who like Maryland. I'm sure for everyone on that team and in the Maryland community that knows and watches Maryland basketball. If you watch it a little bit, if you watch it a lot, you know how big of a deal it is to have Julian Reese back. And honestly, I'm surprised. I have to say I was wrong. I was wrong because I thought Julian Reese was probably going to enter the portal. I thought it made a lot of sense, and I thought he might be gone after this season, and I still think that I had pretty good reason to believe that he could enter the portal. Multiple of the different people that follow this stuff closely, the close sources on Twitter, were saying they wouldn't be surprised, and they thought that that was probably the most likely scenario. And it also made sense in my head because I could see how he's been at Maryland for 3 years now. He's done a lot of good things for this program. He's put up a lot of big numbers, and he's been honorable mention Big Ten, and he's done some really big things for Maryland basketball. I could see him being like, this Maryland basketball program isn't in the best spot right now, and I've been here. I've given a lot to this program. Maybe I'm going to enter the portal and see what else is available out there. Where else could my potential and my talent be used? I thought that was a reasonable take. I thought that made a lot of sense, honestly, for him to enter the portal and just see what else is out there. But he didn't feel the need to do that. And I'm not complaining about it, but I still feel like it would have been a reasonable choice for him to do that. And he still could have ended up being like, I'm coming back to Maryland. But that's not what he did. He decided off rip that this is where I want to be. This is where I want to stay. And there's a saying that it's not always better on the other side. And that is true in sports, whether it's if a guy asks for a trade in the NFL or the NBA and it doesn't look so good once you get traded and things don't work out quite as well as they did at your previous spot. Or in college, that example can be used a lot with the portal. Sometimes guys transfer and think that they can get a better role at a better school, a school that might have a better record, just more talent on their team or whatever it is. But sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you end up sitting. Sometimes you're not as good as you thought you were going to be. Sometimes there's just different cases where it's not always better on the other side. And I'm not saying that would have happened in Julian Reese. He could have gone basically probably anywhere in the country. maybe just about everywhere. I think he could have probably gone. I think a lot of teams would have recruited him out of the portal. He definitely would have been one of the biggest recruits in the portal for sure, but he decided to stay, and maybe he thought to himself, it's not always better on the other side. So I definitely have zero complaints at all that Julian Reese is coming back. And I think the Terps are rebuilding this thing really well. I think this offseason is pretty much going as well as you probably could have asked for it to go. Think about how much we've done and the start to it. I really don't think you could ask for a better way to go throughout this offseason. I was really just hoping, okay, we're probably going to lose Julian Reese. I know we're going to lose Jameer Young and Dante Scott because they're going to be gone. But I was thinking, how can we still find a way to rebuild this? I was like, okay, we're going to lose Reese, but getting Rodney Rice is a really big deal. And I consider Derek Queen kind of part of getting someone in the offseason as well. So landing those three guys back to back, starting with Derek Queen, who's a 5-star, who probably will be preseason Big Ten Player of the Year. Or I have to check out who are the other freshmen coming into the Big Ten. But I know maybe he won't because Rutgers has those couple of guys in their class. They have the number 2 and the number 3 player. But I'm sure Derek Queen will definitely be in that position and will have a shot to win Big Ten Player of the Year for sure. And then so you got him, you got the 5-star Derek Queen, and then it's we just got Rodney Rice, who's one of the better players in the portal, who's a DMV guy who's going to really help us at the guard spot, could be a starter next year as well, can shoot the ball, can do everything really well and at a high level, doesn't have a weakness in his game. And then you get your star player back, your second best player from last year back, and the guy that probably you most wanted to get back on this team after everyone thought that there could be a ton of guys that entered the portal. And there still was a lot of guys that entered the portal in Noah Batchelor, Caleb Swan Rogers, and Jonathan Lamoth. And I don't want to say that those guys entering the portal help us, but in my honest opinion, it does help us. And I'm not going to be the one to lie. I don't want to switch things up and on them and think that they're not good players or whatever. I think they're good players, but I think them entering the portal does help Maryland basketball. And that's me being 100% honest because it opens up slots that we can use in the portal. And those couple of guys, they just weren't quite meshing with what we had done, and they just weren't really getting it done for us. And I think those guys can be good players somewhere else, but I don't think they quite mesh with what Maryland basketball wanted or really what we needed. And so now we can open up the portal after losing those couple of guys and get guys like Rodney Rice, who I think are going to have bigger impacts on the program, and then get Julian Reese as well. And I don't want to lessen how good of a player Julian Reese is. I want to make sure I emphasize he is one of the best players he'll be one of the best returning players in the Big Ten. I totally expect him next year to get first team All Big Ten, second team All Big Ten, something like that. He should be on an All Big Ten team next year. I think there's no reason he shouldn't be. I think he is going to be the best defender coming back in the Big Ten potentially. I think he was ranked as the third one, the third best in terms of blocking shots and defensive statistics in the Big Ten in terms of big men. I think he does an awesome job protecting the rim. When he averaged almost 2 blocks a game. I think it was 1.9 block per game he averaged. So he does a great job of that. So we get a rim protector coming back, and then he also gives us about 14 points a game. He averaged 13.7, 14 points and 9.5 rebounds. He was second in the Big Ten in terms of double-doubles behind Zach Edey, and you know that he's going to get a double-double every single game. I don't know. I wonder if there's a game that guy didn't get a double-double. But besides Zach Edey, he was the most in the Big Ten for double-doubles. So he's a double-double machine. He can score the ball. He can score the ball down low. And getting a post presence like that for a Maryland team that struggled in terms of scoring last year, and he was one of our best ways to score the ball is to give it to him down low. It's awesome to have Julian Reese back and have that player down low that's going to really help us, and then also helps us on the defensive side of the ball. And then you get a whole offseason of work with Julian Reese, and I know Kevin Willard is going to try and make him better. if he could incorporate a mid-range shot in his game, he would be so good. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but if he could shoot the mid-range ball, not even the three-point, just the mid-range ball, he could be a really good player. And if he improves that free throw shooting, it's going to be scary in the Big Ten for Julian Reese. And he definitely might be, I would guess, probably preseason All Big Ten. I forget how many teams they do for preseason All Big Ten. I don't know if they do first and second team. But if they did second team, I would expect him to be on that list. But I would have to check the returners out. I'll talk about that another day, the top returners in the Big Ten, and if Julian Reese is one of them. But so far, so good. I think it's a huge deal that he's coming back, and I think it's the biggest news of the offseason. And I'm still a little bit surprised that he is coming back. But Maryland's second best player from last year, one of our best players, one of the best guys in the Big Ten is coming back, and that's huge news for Maryland basketball. Maryland spring practice starts today. I'm going to go through just a quick basic outline of spring that everyone should be looking at. I will tell you about that after this ad from eBay. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride or die every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. I know personally my bracket is messed up now, even though it was pretty good for a second there, but I know everyone else's bracket is messed up as well. So whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That sounds like a pretty good deal to me. That's $200 in bonus bets to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Don't miss out on that deal on FanDuel. So the spring practice is here for Maryland basketball, and I want to kind of get into my thoughts on the spring and a basic outline of what I'm looking at going into spring practice for Maryland football. It's springtime, and there's a lot to talk about for this Maryland team. I think there's more question marks going into this season than last year, especially just because, number one, the quarterback thing, that's the number one question mark of this offseason. It's the biggest question mark, and it's probably going to determine if Maryland can get back to how we were last year, which isn't anything crazy amazing. We're no Bama or Michigan or Ohio State or whatever blue blood you want to talk about, Georgia, but we're a pretty good team in the Big Ten, and we're able to have above a 500 record overall and be in a good spot. We've won 3 straight bowl games. We beat Auburn in a bowl game last year. So if we want to get back to that, it's going to really determine how this quarterback room plays out. Obviously, there's other question marks, but the biggest thing going into the spring is the absence of Talia. He's been there forever. He has all the Maryland quarterback records. Coach Loxley's success has been it's been really when Talia has come and how Talia has played. A lot of that's been one of the biggest indicators of Coach Loxley's success. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but as Talia came, Coach Loxley started to look a lot better, and our records started looking a lot better. So that's the number one thing, the absence of Talia. And then that leads into the quarterback battle with MJ Morris, Billy Edwards, and Cameron Edge. It's a battle for those three in terms of who's going to be the starter next year. I think a lot of people think MJ Morris, but I'm not so sold. I don't know yet. I'm not saying it's not him, but I don't know who it's going to be. I still want to be able to watch more of MJ Morris because I haven't gone back and watched all of his games at NC State. I'm busy. I would love to do that, but I still haven't been able to go back and watch as much as I would want on MJ Morse, but I do plan on watching a couple of his games just to get the idea. I watched a couple already, but I want to watch a couple more of his games and see how he's played against some of the better teams in the ACC. I know he hasn't played always, and there's kind of a weird situation, but I do want to go back and see how he has played to really get an idea more of his game. But I'm still not sold from what I have seen. I think he's a good player, but I think Edwards, I don't know if Edwards, if they see him more of a package guy or they can actually see him as QB1. I see him more of as a package guy, but Cameron Edge has got that natural just arm. And so that's going to just be interesting. That's really thing number one, the quarterback competition. It always starts there. That's always how it's going to start. And I think Coach Loxley also, can he be successful without Talia? Those are my two biggest question marks going into the off season. We're going to talk about it a ton and a ton and a ton. Next, offensive line. Who takes over in that room? Who steps up? We lose a lot of starters in there. Ayizde and DJ are both trying to get drafted, but we picked up Ba from Georgia, and then we also got Heron, who came from Division II, from Shorter University, who was originally going to Penn State, and there's other guys. We got a guy from Purdue and Kallenberger. Like, we've got different guys in that room, but does the offense line come together? Is it better? Is it worse than last year? I thought last year was it was solid at times. Like, at times it wasn't good when we played probably the better teams. Sometimes it held up. I don't know. But I do think that the offensive line is a big question mark this offseason. It's always a question mark. We're always probably going to have to go into the portal to make sure it's used well. But it's also how well you're going to develop some of these younger guys that you've recruited a big time, especially in the 2024 class. A lot of offensive linemen. So we'll see how well that fares. But those guys aren't going to be ready yet. It's just how you've developed those guys in the offensive line. And then also, how do the portal guys look and how do the five come out on the offensive line? That's one of the biggest things on the offense. Maybe the biggest thing outside of the quarterback room. And then the wide receiver room, Caden Prather and Ty Felton, those are probably my least questionable things about Maryland, maybe on the entire team. But it's like, who is the third guy? Who steps up in that room? Octavian Smith, I think, has a really good shot to be that type of guy in terms of like the speed and everything that he has. And you look at Shalik Knotts, Ryan Manning, maybe. There's different guys, maybe Mekhi White as a freshman. There's different guys in that room that could be really good players. But is there a third guy that's like a clear third guy? Because last year was clearly Jay-Sean Jones, Ty Felton, and Caden Prather. Does someone step in to what Jay-Sean Jones did, or is it more wide receiver by committee type of thing for the third spot? Like, how does that all fare in the wide receiver room? It's not a huge question mark, but you still want someone to end up being pretty big time in that wide receiver room outside of Caden Prather and Ty Felton. And the tight end room is really interesting going into the spring. Is it deep enough for the Big Ten? That's my question mark. Do we have enough bodies in there that are high enough level players? Is Preston Howard ready to be tight end one? That's a really big thing. And then tight end two, is it Dylan Wade? Is it that young in the tight end room? Is there anything else we need to do in there? Will someone else come out? I don't know. The tight end room, I think, is really interesting overall. What will happen with it? We lost our tight end one, and it's going to be interesting to see how it fares out in the time. And then we move on to the defensive side of the ball, and there's definitely plenty of question marks on this side too going into the spring. And I think some of the biggest ones is, can our defensive line be elite in the Big Ten? When I think of elite groups in the Big Ten in terms of the defensive line, you never really are going to think Maryland. And I'm not saying you should think Maryland, but this group is good in terms of the guys coming back. So can they be one of our strengths of our team, or are they going to kind of not live up to that? Because I've been talking about, I really do think this defensive line group can be one of the better groups in the Big Ten, because everyone's back and they weren't bad last year. And I think they were kind of young in a lot of spots. Can we be good in terms of the edge group and the interior? I think you have a lot of different good players in that group. Can they be an elite group? And in the linebacker room, can we make up for the loss of Jay-Sean Barham in terms of his big plays, in terms of his talent, in terms of sometimes his pass rushing ability and his blitzing ability? Can we make up for that? Do we have enough high-level players? I know we have really good players, but do we have that guy that can really be a playmaker in there in the linebacker room? In the quarterback room, I really have no idea who the starters are right now. Jalen Husky, I guess, because we got him in the portal from Bowling Green. I'm guessing he's one. But other than that, I guess Glendon Miller again in the slot. But I don't really know who's going to be the other starter. I don't even know if Jalen Husky is a starter. Is it going to be a young guy? How does that cornerback room come together? I don't really know. We lost both of our guys on the outside, so that's one of the biggest things is the secondary. And who's the starter next to Dante Trader? Does Glendon Miller move up to safety next to Dante, and we have those two back there, or does Glendon Miller stay in the slot and play down low down there in the nickel spot? I don't know who is going to start next to Dante. Does Brandon Jacobs step up? Is it a young guy? I don't really know, and that's going to be one of the bigger question marks. Of course, I have ideas and stuff, but I just want to give you guys a basic outline of every position group, basically, and what are the question marks. There are a fair amount of question marks. There is talent coming back, but there is a lot of guys to replace over these last couple of years. But Maryland's done a pretty good job of replacing guys, but we'll see overall how the spring goes. Give props to Kevin Willard because Kevin Willard is cooking. I will tell you about that after this ad from Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight is brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week we're picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys were able to take it to the next level. The North Carolina Tar Heels only can be described as the Armada. This one seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they secured a spot in the Sweet 16 this Thursday against Alabama in the NCAA tournament. They're the favorite picked by many to make a run for a championship. The Iowa State Cyclones can only be described as a Pathfinder. They've been thrilling to watch and have really created a lane for themselves entering the tournament as one of the hottest teams in the country. They have a date with Illinois this Thursday in the Sweet 16. The NC State Wolfpack are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised us all with the powerful performance in their first two games in the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have set them up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Golden Grizzlies have done here. Take the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Kevin Willard is cooking, and we need to give him props. The offseason that Kevin Willard has put together so far, and I touched on it a little bit in the first segment, but I really want to make a segment out of it, is quite honestly amazing so far. It's literally as perfect as it could have gone. And we're going to see the rest of the moves that Kevin Willard makes, but so far Kevin Willard is cooking, and I really do think he's a really good recruiter. I think he's done a really good job recruiting over his first 2 years at Maryland, when I think Deshaun and Jamie last year in the 4 stars, and then you look at this year, you just got Derek Queen, a 5-star, one of the best players in the class. He's done a really good job recruiting. Last year was horrible. I'm not going to tell you it any differently. It was a horrible year by Kevin Willard. It was a horrible year by everyone in the Maryland program, and it didn't come together the way it was supposed to. But so far this offseason, he's doing things that, like, I got to be like, wow, Kevin Willard, you're cooking. You're doing things the right way, and how Maryland fans drew it up and how we kind of wanted this offseason to go. For him to be able to get Derek Queen, I think that was a huge deal. Not just because he's a 5-star and all that, but how the Maryland season was going, we were pretty bad. We were pretty bad this year. And I got really discouraged about the Derek Queen stuff because it was like he was supposed to commit to us and he was crystal ball to us for a little bit. And then it was like there was a huge period where it was like, oh, maybe he's not coming. He like pushed back his commitment date. I guess he thought it through, which I don't blame him doing that. I would have probably done the same thing. But he didn't commit to Maryland, and he waited, and I was like, is he still a Maryland Terrapin? And he gave other schools a chance to continue to recruit him and to continue to say that you should come here. But that did not stop him from coming to Maryland, and that I got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Willard for, even though it's a tough year and we don't look that good and other teams might look more appealing, whether it's he was choosing between Houston, Kansas, Indiana, and us. Kansas, I'm sure, was Bill Self, one of the best coaches of all time. I'm sure that looked pretty appealing. And then Houston, they're one of the best teams as well now, year in and year out. And so I'm looking at the Derek Queen stuff, and I'm like, wow, that's a really good recruitment from Kevin Willard to still be able to get Derek Queen. And then you get to Rodney Rice, exactly what we needed. Okay, he's a Maryland guy, and it made sense for him to come to Maryland, but Mike Jones is gone now. That connection that we had to Rodney Rice, that is completely gone. Mike Jones is at Old Dominion. And if you guys don't remember, Mike Jones was Rodney Rice's head coach at DeMatha. And DeMatha is where Rodney Rice went to high school. But that connection's over. That connection's done with. But he was still able to pull through and get Rodney Rice, who's going to be a really good player. Some of you guys probably don't realize how good he is because you probably look at the statistics that he averaged 7 points his freshman year, which is still a pretty good number for a guy to average his freshman year. But he's going to be a really good player. I think he can be like a 12, 13 points per game guy next year, depending on his role. For him to get Rodney Rice, one of the better players in the portal, after us, again, not looking very good last year, and then he is able to keep Julian Reese, that is a masterclass so far from Kevin Willard. I think that's what a lot of people would call it. That's pretty big time because the Julian Reese stuff has its own complications. It seemed that time Julian Reese wasn't happy to be a Maryland guy, and I guess that was wrong, and things didn't go right last year, and there were times he didn't play his best ball. He had a lot of great games, of course, but there were times things weren't looking pretty good, and we weren't very good last year, and it was probably a struggle last year. But for Kevin Willard to maintain Julian Reese too and not even have him look in the portal at all, that's Kevin Willard doing really big things in recruiting and the rest of the coaching staff. And now the team going into next year looks a lot better already. Looks a lot better than it did when we were looking at it this offseason and saying, oh no, this team might not be good. We're looking at potentially maybe the best front court in the entire Big Ten with Derek Queen and Julian Reese. I think it's got to be, if you probably look at it and go through every team, what team has a better front court than that? And then you pick up a guard like Rodney Rice. That's absolutely what we needed. And we still have more spots. We still have like 2 spots open to recruit guys and to get somebody else in here. And you forget that Stevens is coming back, and we'll see what happens with Jahari Long. And there's other guys that still could potentially enter the portal, and that could open up more spots. But depending if Maryland can get a really good player with this next spot, I think we're in a really good spot. But that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked on Terps.